Coming up to the time of the solar eclipse in Leo, the male energy of Leo the Lion, also at the beginning of August or towards the end of July, in fact, the Lion's Gate opened, and we've been having the Leo energies for some time, and they'll be with us throughout this period of time. Also, very recently, a couple of days ago, Mercury went into retrograde, and I know my favourite blog, Stillness of the Storm, Justin, has posted a couple of videos about Mercury going into retrograde, and they were very, very pertinent to me because of various what you might call disasters which seem to occur around that time, to do with technical things, to do with misunderstandings. So, and also it so happened that I had researched this just because of certain things that had come into my life, kind of what you might call signs, if you like, the sort of higher powers were hinting, and I think it was exactly this Mercury that they were going on about. Now, these two features, the Mercury going into retrograde and the solar power of Leo, are quite linked in some ways, because with Mercury going into the retrograde, we have a feeling of chaos, we have a feeling of breaking down, in a sense, perhaps the sort of feelings of revolution. And with Leo, of course, we have the divine male energy, the courage of the lion, the strength, and also the male energy of action, of bringing things down into action. Now, I'm just going to tell you a little story. I was on holiday recently, and I downloaded a book to read, as one often does, and I sort of started being interested in looking at the alternative stories about Jesus. Really, I wanted to see what the alternative take on this was. So I was reading a Ralph Ellis book, and Ralph Ellis is an amazing writer, by the way, and I'm going to be doing some book reviews of his two books which I've read now. So anyway, I was sitting in my back garden and I was reflecting on this Ralph Ellis book, and sort of daydreaming, as I tend to do. And one of the things that Ralph Ellis says is that he believes that Jesus was of a rich but basically that he was involved in a struggle that was both political and spiritual, and that's one thing that I do want to talk about. I'm going to talk about that in a little bit more depth. And I was reflecting on this aspect of this male energy, if you like, of Jesus, the action, the political activity, and then also the spiritual teachings that Jesus had. And it seemed that the two kind of come together, that, if you like, one is one side of the coin and the other is the other side of the coin. And with Jesus, you certainly see in the Gospels and things, you see the idea of compassionate love for fellow man, love for the underprivileged on the one side, and on the other side of the coin, if you like, you have what I would call righteous anger. And I was reflecting in the garden how within the community of light workers and light warriors, we have those people, often people are engaged in one side of the coin or the other. So we have the light workers, perhaps, who are more engaged in the love and the meditation and the bringing that about. And then we have the light warriors who are on the ground, drawing attention to the injustices, and often through political action or through action that is to do with the political institutions, directly confronting this, often with tremendous bravery and strength, I have to say. And as I was sitting in the garden, I was actually meditating about these light workers and feeling that we are all on the higher level, we are all one, because we're all aligned to the same purpose. And at the same time, I was feeling almost like the presence, or I was feeling all the people through history, all the people that have died, who have died trying to bring about a greater world, or who have worked during their lifetime trying to bring about a better world, who've been driven by the desire for justice, the desire for peace, the desire for love. And I was feeling the presence of all of these, because somehow once we go beyond the 3D level, we feel a sense of timelessness, that in a sense there is no time, because that vibration, that energy of of that person is there, and it's there for us to connect to. So when we connect not only with brothers and sisters who are in the here and now, but throughout time. And it just suddenly came to me that the thought that Jesus was a light worker, and he was up there with all the others. And the interesting thing is that about an hour later, as I was going out the house, I seemed to get a sign, a confirmation of this, that actually was hilarious for members of my family, who were literally struck dumb, even though they don't believe in anything as silly as signs from heaven. Of course, I'm kind of not sure I totally believe, but I'm definitely open-minded to the idea. I'm going to tell you about that sign a little bit later. I'll save it for the end, because it's really quite exciting. But what this sign did show to me was the way that I interpreted it. Was I interpreted it as the power and the force of male energy that could be unleashed during this month. When the sun goes into its solar eclipse, it may be that there are coronal rays ejected. It may be that there is quite a lot of power from the sun, and these things may be quite likely to affect our consciousness. Also, there's the feeling that one of the reasons why it's good to be aware of these things, and good to be aware of the flow of the solar changes, and the way that the sun moves through the universe, is because these things affect our consciousness, and if we can be within the flow of them, then we can align ourselves. It's a little bit like, actually it was a dream I had the other morning of a very, very long stream bed, and it's the feeling that when you're going downstream, if you choose to travel downstream, that your path is very much easier, and you can use the forces of nature to assist you in many ways. So it's very much the same principle. And I feel that this male energy is to do with, it is sometimes to do with power and force, defending what is ours, our own sovereignty, our own being, our own property, and our own freedom. And of course, in terms of our sovereign rights, we have the right to use force to defend our own personal sovereignty, and we also have the right to use force to defend the innocent. And so, whilst peaceful means and working together is always going to be the preferable option, at times defensive force may be necessary. So this force was one of the things that occurred to me. And the other thing is that the male energy is very much the energy of action, and it's action in the 3D, it's action in the here and now. And I was, because of this relationship with Jesus and various other things I'd been doing and various things I stumbled across the internet, I have come across two people who to me personified some of the great examples of male energy enacting and creating within our environment. And the first example is a chap called Kevin Annett, who has created the ITCCS, the International Tribunal. And this is a structure which basically uses citizen groups to produce trials. And of course, one of the things that a lot of us are aware of is the sort of psychopathic control system, which is using all sorts of heinous crimes and horrible black magic rituals as a means of control. And because these people can evade justice, it's almost like humanity lying down and being walked all over. And one of the things that Kevin has done is that he's actually asserted his freedom and on behalf of humanity all of our freedoms, and basically looked at first principles to enact a law which is based on God's law, which is to do with our inherent sovereignty. And he's actually produced structures and got groups of people together, and this kind of structure can operate anywhere. It can operate globally. And he's also created the Republic of Kanata, which he said was a kind of in between stage, because I think Kevin really feels that a kind of anarchistic, or if you like, free society is preferable, but understands that most people are really followers rather than leaders. So in a way they are happy if there are structures. And so one of the things to transition into the new earth is that we need to be building structures and creating safe spaces for people to feel that they can move from one area, which is the area of obeying authority and believing in authority, and they can move from this area to another safe space. And then as they progress and grow spiritually and grow in confidence and grow as a person, they can then progress to more freedom. If you like, it's the sort of stages of freedom. But the principle is very much the same as the principle that the cabal, if you like, or the controllers, the control system uses, in that you simply roll your sleeves up and you start to build a system from underneath, and you often build from underneath, and everything is almost in place before the final thing is knocked down. So it's very much that I feel it's a physical, almost male thing of rolling your sleeves up and starting and building these structures. And the other person who really inspired me recently in a similar way, and there is a connection actually, which I'll tell you about in a minute, between Kevin and this person, although they're very, very different. And that person is Ronald Bernard. Now, a lot of you will know that Ronald Bernard came out recently with his with his, if you like, confessional interview about how he was very highly in stockbroking, and then he was eventually invited abroad and asked to attend a child sacrifice ceremony, and the fallout from this changed his whole life, because once he'd refused the invitation, it was kind of, it was like the path, you know, the choice. You could no longer go in one direction, you had to go in the other, and obviously getting out of where he was not easy. But I discovered that that actually happened quite a long time ago, and since then, because Ronald's life completely changed, and his whole polarity and the way that he was, his whole direction changed, that he spent many years as a community entrepreneur, and then eventually creating a blueprint for a bank which could actually be a blueprint that's completely international. And he has 4,500 people working for him. And I was really excited to find this out, because he's such a skilled person in this area, and to have somebody of that caliber, I think, who is committed to this project is amazing. And I think the thing about this is that, again, it's about starting at the very grassroots level. So in his description, Ronald starts off at analysing all of the elements of the banking system and the way in which this essentially enslaves us. It takes our money and takes away our ownership at the same time. And of course, this completely interweaves with the role of the state in doing a similar thing. And he basically unpicks it all and then demonstrates how, by having a citizen initiative which has organisational structures that are international, but things are based on a local level, that you can actually move towards better systems, even in the end having enough money and enough wealth to mean that there isn't any need for personal taxation, that you can actually operate things through just a simple and low tax on purchases, that actually there is so much more money in the system when the fraudulent way of creating money and raising debt is no longer in place. It just seems like a totally natural system. And again, very exciting that this is something that has been, somebody has rolled their sleeves up and they've created this, and lots of people are working alongside. And it's another example of a unification of a system that can be taken, where we can literally start to build the new earth. And I mean, I'm very excited to try and be part of some of these things. And I think I started off this talk by talking about Justin, and Justin, who runs Stillness of the Storm, is another person who's talked very recently about unity in the community. And I feel this is an example of projects that are unified. The other thing about Ronald's project as well is that he's talking a lot about the fact that this bank basically invests in ethical enterprises. So it's really genuinely ethical enterprises, and the sort of enterprises that are going to be so important to bring forth in the birth of the new earth, and also with the disclosure of all of the technology which at the moment is denied to us. So things like advanced healing technologies, advanced energy technologies, things like housing, all of these sort of things. And it's just an amazing opportunity for encouraging and engendering entrepreneurship So I think that's amazing. So there are two very, very powerful individuals there who are really rolling their sleeves up and getting involved as leaders, but as leaders in a system which is something that everybody has participation in and ownership of. And I think that's literally amazing. And it was so funny actually that I was actually, I'd been looking at Ronald's stuff because I want to, on my new blog, I want to do some things about his bank project. And then I suddenly thought that Kevin Annett would be a good person, perhaps for me to send some information about my new blog. And also, I'm going to do a book review of his book, which I read about the Holocaust in the Canadian schools, which was wonderful. And then I clicked on Kevin's blog, and it was so funny. It was one of those cases of synergy, because I clicked on his blog and I'd been reading about Jesus, and I'd been watching Ronald's talk, which has just been translated into English from the Dutch, which is all about his new bank project. And he'd mentioned Jesus as a revolutionary. And I clicked on Kevin's blog, and immediately there's a picture of Jesus as a revolutionary, and then there is the picture of Jesus in the temple waving a sort of sword, and in the background are all the merchant bankers. And so that was really funny. And I think that the third thing that I wanted to say, just to round off in regards to Ralph Ellis's book, is that he in his second book, actually, which I was reading, which is the one to do with Egypt, he was saying about, he believes that Jesus was involved in the armed struggle. And I was thinking of the way that the political and the spiritual are enmeshed, because obviously there's this issue of leadership, that you need to rise into your leadership in order to give those who are not leaders the opportunity to be involved at a very interactive level in the new systems where they can grow and understand, because people often only can experience things through actually experiencing living them. If you look at something like the concept of freedom, a lot of people have very little concept of freedom. It's only perhaps the next step, the something they would like to be free to do. So they might only see freedom in terms of something that's one step up from what they have. And I was thinking about this, and I was thinking about those concepts and the concept of love, and how do we learn the concept of love? And we often learn the concept of love really through our parents, and initially through the mother's love. And it's not a concept that we would really understand or be able to talk about or have any real concept of unless we'd experienced it. And it's very much the same with freedom. So Jesus was in this position a long time ago, that he believed in certain things, and we think it was to do with the personal sovereignty and to do with the freedom of the spirit and the freedom of the individual and the growth of the self and the respecting of free will. And he was in the unfortunate position that the masses of people did not value this, because they hadn't experienced it, they hadn't really lived it, that they didn't desire it. And if you don't desire it, then you're not going to put yourself out for it. So his job, because he wanted to resist the oppression, and the sort of stealing of the resources by the Romans, who were certainly at the time when Ralph Ellis thought this was going on, he thought that Jesus was active later than was said in the Bible during the major Jewish revolution. and that basically was involved in trying to prevent a whole series of cities from falling to the Romans. And of course, you're wanting to get people on your side. And it seemed to me that Jesus had all of the same problems and all of the same challenges, if indeed this is a correct version that Ralph Ellis is putting forward. But to me, whether it's a correct version or not, it's a very interesting presentation and a story, that he had all of the same challenges that we face now. So that as the cities were starting to fall to the Romans, the people knew that they had a choice, that they could meekly give in and acquiesce, and they could enjoy some of the carrots that the Romans would give them for not resisting. And they also knew that if there was resistance, that there would be more casualties. And so people who are not interested in the or understanding the morality or having a real sense of freedom and justice are not going to are not going to appreciate wanting to make the sacrifice. Obviously, there is the element of losing your freedom, but then, as always, with powerful and well thought out global powers, there is propaganda that goes along with the takeover. And so that's why his struggle was so much enmeshed between the spiritual and the political, because the two very much go together. And finally, I've saved it for the end, but I'm just going to tell you about the experience I had while I was on holiday, which has sparked off the need and the desire for me to do this talk. And that was that after I'd been just relaxing in the garden and I was meditating on the light workers and the revolutionaries and the artists and the people who believed in peace on earth and justice and beauty and truth and all those things throughout the ages, and feeling that they were all together and that Jesus was a light worker. And it was actually, I was sitting outside, but I have to say it was very, very, very humid. And there was a feeling that there was going to be possibly some sort of storm brewing. About half an hour later, we were ready to go out and went out to the car. And it was the funniest thing. As I say, even my family were like virtually agog, and they definitely don't believe in any kind of supernatural things or whatever. The sky looked reasonably normal, but then all of a sudden, as we stood there, the sky coalesced into this most blackest cloud you have ever seen. And I'm not kidding, it was a huge cloud, but it was literally directly over and in front of our cottage where we were staying. And at the same time, there started to be enormous rumblings of thunder, absolutely enormous rumblings of thunder, and a massive sheet of lightning. And then the heavens literally opened, and we have never ever experienced such a sudden and fast downpour. It was literally like, the wrath of God or whatever. It was absolutely incredible. And I have no idea really